I'm going to look forward to playing them, and that's what I love to do. I love to prove people wrong. So that's going to be 2 games that I'm going to have a lot of fun playing.
That was, I believe it, yes, Gavin Potter, Broken Arrow. He didn't play at that silly hat game, though. I'll give him credit.
No, he played the shirt game.
He played the shirt game.
The even sillier shirt game.
Yes.
Yeesh.
RJ Young joining us. RJ,
your thoughts.
Oh, okay.
On shirts versus hats?
Yeah,
No, just in general. I don't know if you heard the cut from Gavin Potter. He's a good player, really good player out of Broken Arrow. He's going to Kansas. Then he pops off about playing OU and Oklahoma State, and we get it. That happens all the time, but typically it's not aired or talked about during a signing period. But we know guys that don't maybe get a local offer. They've always got a chip on their shoulder. But I mean, we saw that chip come out.
No, I think Gavin's onto something. I think this is also speaking to the way that I interpret football and frankly the kids interpret football. And this kind of gets roundabout into the news of the day. I was 13 when the XFL came out. So, celebrating, talking noise, all that kind of stuff, I grew up with it. Same thing with the NBA. We saw Kevin Durant troll his own media contingent for 12 minutes. That's just the way that the game is going now. So I actually would enjoy it more if kids turn their signing days into WWE events as opposed to I'm going to pick up a hat. Okay, fine. Most of us have a good idea of what hat you're choosing, but if you're going to come out here and say, I'm coming for Oklahoma State, I'm coming for Oklahoma, I'm coming for everybody that slighted me, hey, we just fell in love with a guy like that, and his name's Baker Mayfield, and he's got Cleveland marching to his beat, so I don't necessarily fault him for it, and I get it. I also understand that Oklahoma State kids and OU kids, they don't have the same chip. They're there, especially if you're the kind of kid that ends up at Kansas with the kind of class that Kansas put together, and I know Les Miles and whatnot, but you're not feeling really great. And to that point, we're talking about Tulsa, you got a bunch of kids in Broken Arrow, Owasso, and in the TPS system that want OU and Oklahoma State offers and ain't getting them, so yeah, they're right to hold a grudge.
Again, we talked about it a bunch, but now that it's finished off, 2019 recruiting class, they end up at 24/7 Sports had them number 6. They would have been a top 5 class except Texas because of I don't know if you call him a recruit with the receiver McCoy. They bump up into the top 3. So OU ends up right there around 6, but still a really good class for them. I like what they did defensively, and I think they're doing a good job recruiting numbers-wise. Kind of your breakdown of the class.
No, I mean, you got more defensive players in the class than offensive players in the class, and yet you would look at that offense and go, man, there's some talent over there and tremendous upside. And I know that potential and upside are dangerous words, and for folks that aren't necessarily into recruiting full-time and don't really understand what it means to get a commit at what point in time, you just need to know that Jaden Hazelwood, Theo Weiss, Spencer Rattler, those 3 alone in one class makes that an outstanding class. Those are, that's not even including guys like Austin Stogner. That's not including guys like Trajan Bridges. So from an offensive standpoint, you're looking at just reloading with what could be a very, very fun football team in 2021 and beyond. And on the defensive side of the ball, you filled some needs, right? We're all talking about the way that defensive backs played last year and the year before, and you got some 4-star guys back there that absolutely know how to play some ball, and you got some really high football IQ guys playing the safety positions. In particular, Jamal Morris is a guy who folks kind of forgot about a little bit. I don't know, we talked about Ty DeArmond because he signed late, but both of those guys have extremely high football IQs, and you got a guy like Jaden Davis who can play any position in the defensive backfield, and you got another guy like Woody Washington who comes in as the top player out of Tennessee and also shunned the Volunteers so he can come to Oklahoma. So there's a lot to be excited about in this class.
Talking with RJ Young, YouTube sensation, writer, author, all of it. He does everything. He'll tape your ankles. He can do everything. Let me ask you this, RJ. I didn't get to ask you about it earlier this week, but that kind of news had spread. You saw Kenny Mossman had tweeted about it, and it was something to the effect of the OU and OU football was the most social media driven or tweeted about program.
We talked about that
in the
Friday, I think. Yeah.
And so let me ask you this, RJ. They are doing some pretty cool things, and this is kind of a Lincoln Riley mandate. When he took over the program, he's got their recruiting side going really well. They've got good TV, movie production type people doing their production of videos and different things like that. This is kind of what Lincoln envisioned, and then of course it comes true because it gets so much traction on social media, and I think if you would have told me 2 or 3 years ago when Lincoln took the job, this is what he wants the program to be, I'd say, yeah, I think he can do that.
Well, also you're talking about guys that and women that do not get the proper recognition because they don't want it necessarily. They're not out front like that. But I'm going to throw the name out that folks probably know of Zach Heffley, who is their head of digital content, and he does an outstanding job with the little bitty things that you might see on Twitter that take a lot of production time. And as a guy who spends a lot of time in an editor and is playing around with things like Final Cut and Premiere Pro and Adobe After Effects, I can tell you those cuts are very, very hard to do, and the way that they're able to pull them off gives that effect, right? It gives off what they want if you're Lincoln Riley about, hey, we're not only reclass, we understand, we get it. We understand that movies are a big deal, and making many movies out of the content that we already have and the access that we already have is a very big edge for us. All we have to do is leverage it. And I think leveraging it, especially in this age of what other folks call social media and I just call the internet, is what you have to do. And if you're a football coach, you're not necessarily thinking about the best way to brand your program when you should be. You're thinking about recruiting, you're thinking about X's and O's. But Lincoln grew up the way that I grew up, right?
Sure.
Lincoln Riley, 35. I'm 31. He understands. This is part of him growing up. He grows up with the internet. So him to go and hire these kinds of folks, yeah, absolutely, it made a lot of sense. But for OU to get the most mentions among every college football program, and for Lincoln Riley to be the most tweeted about coach of any college football program, also stands to point out that fans are very smart and they're very savvy and they're going to go where the brand tells them to go, and the brand is OU. And when they know that recruiting news and news in general breaks on Twitter, they all get Twitter accounts. And now we're educating some folks that didn't necessarily think they were going to have Twitter accounts about what they're for and how to use them. And we talk about not tweeting at recruits and those sorts of things. And that kind of etiquette is going to get better. Folks are going to get more ethical with what they do and how they say on Twitter, Facebook, social media, YouTube, whatnot. But I think that Lincoln is showing everybody how to do this. And it's kind of like with the spring game and with recruiting and the satellite camps that were a big deal. You're just going to have to do it. And I'm really glad that OU is out in front of all of this because it makes my job, your job, a lot more fun.
Let me ask you this. To go along with that, when you have star power, and the last 2 quarterbacks you've had have won Heisman, that obviously helps a little bit. But isn't it crazy to think that 3 years in a row now, OU, with Jalen Hurts coming in this year, they're going to have a commodity. They're going to have a guy that has experience or people are massively aware of. Kyler Murray didn't quite have the experience, but everybody knew who he was. Everybody knew where the guy was coming from. And obviously with Baker, and then with Jalen Hurts, he's going to bring credibility. I mean, it's been a while since OU has started a no-name guy that hadn't played yet. And so from that standpoint, I only see that as you talk about the traction that they get in social media and internet, all the stuff that goes with it, that's only going to get enhanced because when they line up, Jalen Hurts is a quarterback, every college football fan in the country knows who Jalen Hurts is.
Well, and again, that's Jalen Hurts, right? But we've seen this kind of thing happen before at Oklahoma. Justin Brown, people remember transferred from Penn State with that scandal, and he showed up right away and was returning punts and was one of your better wide receivers. Big physical guy, came in with a lot of pedigree of himself. But, of course, nothing on the stature of Jalen Hurts because Jalen Hurts is coming from Alabama, and Alabama is dynastic, and he's got a national championship ring on his fingers. Matter of fact, I got to talk to Minkah Fitzpatrick a little bit about him, just try to figure out the difference between, say, a Tua and a Jalen, and the difference wasn't really in their game as much as we want to make it about the game. He says, look, Jalen knows what he's going to do. He knows how he's going to do it. You're not going to have to wonder about whether this guy gets it. He's going to walk in and he's going to establish himself as a leader, and he'd be shocked if he wasn't voted a captain right away, not just because of his pedigree, but because he will engender trust. And that is what you really want from that quarterback position, especially from a guy who is grad transferring in. And I think that is the thing that I'm going to watch, is how do the kids come around Jalen Hurts, and how much of a leeway does Lincoln Riley give Jalen Hurts, and how he chooses to conduct himself. That's going to be really interesting to me.
RJ, you had mentioned that you were 13 when the XFL came out. I remember being in college, and a couple of guys I knew actually ended up going to play in the league. I always made the comment that smart people, highly successful people, billionaires, you never want to give them a second chance to do a job because generally it's going to work out the second time. I think financially they're in a whole different ballgame with what Vince McMahon is bringing to the table of the XFL. You're not going to get the owner bickering type stuff. It's a different type of platform that I think has a chance to succeed. And with that being said, I scratched my head. I was like, wait, Bob Stoops in Dallas, right? GM and coach, and they've done this before. You know, it was kind of a little bit of a model when they first came out with the XFL years and years ago. They went and grabbed some coaches who had retired or guys that were done coaching. But with this being said, I just feel like there's some legs to this because number one, Bob Stoops isn't going to take a job for $200,000. You're going to have to pay him pretty good. And number two, he brings a name that, oh, by the way, I only got a feeling a lot of guys who maybe didn't make it in the NFL that have been playing at OU the last handful of years might go down there and try out for an XFL team. Why not?
I see it differently because I'm always looking at angles and I'm looking at storylines and I'm looking at the stuff around the X's and O's of the game. And Bob Stoops does not have any professional football coaching experience, and that's going to be brought up as a story because it's the XFL. Everything is a story. I also want to know what it's going to be like, not for Bob Stoops to try to recruit his older players, but for him to go into Bed Bath & Beyond and 7-Eleven and say, hey, you want to come down here and play? And these dudes who are going to be playing for significantly less money than anybody else and significantly less money than Bob Stoops might not be into taking lip from Bob Stoops, even as he comes in there with the pedigree that he has. So I've said, I'm into this for all the wrong reasons. I'm here for the entertainment value because that's also a part of me growing up. I grew up with The Rock. I grew up with John Cena. I grew up with Vince McMahon. I grew up with Triple H. And I'm so excited about what that means for Bob Stoops because what we know about Bob Stoops is he's kind of a straight-laced guy. He's real conservative. He ain't going to necessarily be into what Vince McMahon is going to do. And that is going to be baking soda and vinegar. And I'm excited for those two things to clash.
RJ is all in on the full train wreck that this thing could be. Entertainment-wise, why not?
Yeah. Excellent as always. RJ, have a good weekend. We'll hear you Sunday.
Yes, sir.
At 10 o'clock with Fight.
All right, fellas. I appreciate you.
Excellent. Thanks. RJ Young, OUinsider.com.